Now let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens going into camp are one of the most talented teams in the AFC. Now the biggest storyline for the Ravens is going to be, how is this offense going to look under Todd Monken? Todd Monken, he comes from being the former OC at the University of Georgia for the last couple of years. Their offenses were some of the best in college football. He helped guide them to 2 back-to-back national championships. And when you look at this offense going into training camp, you already know what you're getting from your wide receiver position. You're going to have OBJ, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, but who's going to be wide receiver 3 behind those guys? You still do have James Proche. You also have Devin Duvernay there. But what about Nelson Aguilar? Could he be wide receiver 4 behind Rashad Bateman? You're looking at who's going to be that key guy, who's going to be the first man to step up in case of an injury going down. Now, the second thing that I'm looking at for the Baltimore Ravens outside of wide receiver 4 is who's starting at left guard. Now, they lost their starting left guard and Ben Powers in free agency, who now is with the Denver Broncos, and they got to find a replacement for him. Now, their expected starter at left guard is rookie, and I'm going to try to pronounce his name to the best of my ability, Malasala Amuaveya. Now, he was a 6th-round selection by Baltimore from this past year's draft, hailing from the University of Oregon, and I had a way higher grade than what most analysts had on him. Like, I get it, he's more of an offensive tackle, but I feel like with him at guard, with his size and his athleticism and what he showed on tape last season at Oregon, I mean, this dude is good enough to be a starting caliber offensive guard right away. Now, they probably will have some growing pains with starting him week 1, but I just look at the upside, and the upside is insane. This dude has insane strength. I mean, if you go back and you watch his tape at Oregon, he was literally bullying defensive linemen around in the Pac-12 conference, fam. And you already know that the Pac-12 conference, I don't really think they got a lot of great interior defensive linemen that come from there. So obviously there may be a little bit of an adjustment in the level of competition going from the Pac-12 to the NFL. But this dude was just a wrecking ball at offensive guard for Oregon. And I like his speed. I like his athleticism. He's one of those old school, big offensive guards that just are going to maul you to the ground. Now, his pass blocking does have to improve, but I feel like in run blocking, he's really solid. And I think that's a huge reason why we were hearing reports about him getting first-team reps near the tail end of minicamp for the Baltimore Ravens. And John Harbaugh has had a lot of great reviews about him so far. So if I had to pick who probably was going to end up winning this left guard position, I probably would go with Amua Veya Laulu. Hope I said that right. But if I didn't, I apologize to him. You know, those Hawaiian names are really difficult to pronounce, but when you look at who's going to be behind him, I think it's kind of a little bit of a drop-off. You mean to tell me that you think that John Simpson is going to be able to start over him? Now, John Simpson has a good amount of experience. He was drafted by the Raiders in the 2020 NFL draft. He was a 4th-round pick, and he didn't play well with the Las Vegas Raiders. They ended up releasing him last season. He got signed to the Ravens practice squad at the end of the year, and he pretty much gave him a future/reserves deal. So if John Simpson makes the roster, I think it probably is as a backup, because somebody with this kind of experience, I think you would love to have on your roster. But comparing him to Amuaveya Laulu, I don't really think that he's going to end up winning this position battle if it's really down to him and Laulu, because I just think that when you look at Laulu, I just think that there's just way too much upside with him, and I just think that there's way too much explosiveness that comes with him as a run blocker, and that's what the Ravens kind of look for in their offensive linemen. They look for big, strong guys who are really athletic down there. So I like Laulu. I'm going to try to pronounce his name one more time. Sala Amuaveya Laulu. I really like him to win the starting left guard position for the Baltimore Ravens. But we also can't forget about Ben Cleveland. Ben Cleveland has started a few games for the Baltimore Ravens, but he has missed time due to injuries. And plus, he is a little bit inconsistent. And this is somebody who was a third-round pick by B. Moore in 2021. Now, he has good size. He definitely does have the potential to be a really good offensive guard if he's able to maximize that potential. But I think he's more of a good backup option right now. And then you also have experimented with offensive tackle Daniel Falele. You've moved him around at offensive guard during minicamp and OTA. So you also might experiment with what he can do there. Patrick McCarry is somebody who can play all positions on the offensive line. So maybe he's going to be in this competition as well. But you guys know who I'm rolling with to win this left guard position, man. I'm going with Salah Amuavea Lalulu to win the starting left guard spot for the Baltimore Ravens. And if he does, I'm going to be abusing that name for the whole entire NFL season if he ends up being really good. I think he will be, because the Ravens are a team that's really good at finding talent in the later portions of the draft. So I'm expecting this man to end up winning the starting job. The coaches have been raving about him. I was listening to an interview that John Harbaugh did with the 33rd team. He was saying a lot of good things about him. Like, they like those big athletic guys that can really move. And I really think somebody like him will really transition to offensive guard fairly well. Now, at cornerback, we know that Marlon Humphrey, and I'm trying to think of the other cornerback that you signed who used to play for the Indianapolis Colts. I'm trying to remember. Somebody help me out, man. It's going to come. Rock Ya-Sin. I was about to look it up. So we know that Rock Ya-Sin and Marlon Humphrey are going to be your two starting cornerbacks this year. But who's going to be your corners 3 and 4? Now, Jalen Armour-Daniels was somebody who declared from Alabama last season, who probably should have went back for another year. And he was somebody who has really good size, great athleticism, but he's a really raw cornerback. And last season, when he got opportunities, he did, as expected, he struggled. Because this is somebody who's more of a project cornerback that you just see due to the physical tools and athletic ability. And hopefully you think that your coaching staff can mold him into a great cornerback. But it didn't really pan out all that well. And I don't really know if he's really going to improve all that much as an outside corner. Maybe he's better off playing in the slot. But Jalen Armour-Daniels is somebody who's going to be in the mix for the third or fourth cornerback competition for the Baltimore Ravens. You got Trayvon Mullen, who was a former second-round pick by the Las Vegas Raiders. And I don't know what the hell happened to Trayvon Mullen. This dude went from being a really solid cornerback his first couple of years in Vegas to getting cut and then getting passed around the league like he was a hot potato. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Trayvon Mullen's cousin is Lamar Jackson. And with Lamar Jackson being highly paid and being the starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, I don't really think that Trayvon Mullen's going to get cut. But I don't really see him not having either the third or fourth spot on this depth chart when it comes to corner. I think that Trayvon Mullen, yeah, he may not be starting caliber quality anymore, but I definitely feel like him as your third or fourth best cornerback on your depth chart isn't bad. And he is somebody who can come in and give you a couple of productive games every once in a while, but leaving him out there long term, if you have an injury, I just don't know about that. But if you want him to play in the slot, I think he could be really good in the slot. And I think that Trayvon Mullen may be somebody who kind of has not really been able to benefit from having great coaching. He goes to a Ravens team that is very well coached by their defensive coordinator. And the Ravens, I really feel like, could get the most out of Trayvon Mullen if they want to try to play him in the slot. But even if he has to be their outside corner, you want to be too bad with him starting a couple of games for you if Marlon Humphrey goes down or Rock Ya-Sin goes down. Now, Kyu Blu Kelly really interests me. Cornerback out of Stanford. He kind of reminds me a lot of Jalen Armour Daniel Davis when he was coming out of Bama last year. You have a cornerback that has a lot of physical upside with his size and his athleticism, but he's not the most polished right now. He struggles with really good route runners, so I don't really know if you even want to try to experiment with him in the slot. So maybe he could end up being a really good outside corner. Maybe you could end up moving him to safety. Now, he is really athletic. He is good in man coverage. So, I mean, if you want to put him in the slot, I think he could do okay there. But I don't really know where they're going to put him on this defense. I kind of would love to see him try a little bit of safety. But when you look at Blue Kelly, this is somebody who is really physical. I do think he's pretty good in run coverage as well. And he is solid in man coverage. It's just that he at times can get beat with double moves. And if he's going against a really savvy route runner, he's going to get carved up. Now, Demarion Williams got playing time in the slot last year. I definitely think he probably is going to be in the mix for one of those third or fourth cornerback spots, but I don't really see him as an outside corner. I think he's more of a slot guy. So if they end up having an injury with their starting slot cornerback, I think you go ahead and you insert him there. But if I had to give you guys my prediction about who the third and fourth cornerbacks are probably going to be, I probably would go with Trayvon Mullen to get one of those spots. And honestly, I don't really know who else would be behind them because I'm not really insanely excited about what the Ravens have behind their two starting cornerbacks. So maybe cornerback is something that they should look for free agency to add a little bit more depth to. But I mean, they just have guys who are insanely athletic, good upside, but they still have a long ways to go when it comes to at least being a serviceable cornerback in the league. So if you can find somebody that's at least Trayvon Mullen caliber as your backup cornerbacks, I think you can be fairly fine. Maybe Jalen Armour Davis takes that next step in development. You got to remember, this was somebody who really was just a developmental project when he was coming out of Bama. So it's going to take a couple of years for him to really show you what he has. So maybe Jalen Armour Davis puts it all together. I probably would go with him to get that fourth cornerback spot. I think Demarion Williams is more of a slot guy. So my players to watch for B-More. Definitely got to keep my eyes on Zay Flowers. He was my #1 ranked receiver coming out. Fantastic route runner, dynamic after the catch. And even though he's undersized, you can move him around. He can both play outside and the slot position as well. And I want to see him have a lot of highlight reel plays during training camp that get posted rapidly nonstop against the Baltimore Ravens. This is what you want to see out of a rookie wide receiver. And I was talking to one of my friends. He was like, man, JT, like, you don't have just a little bit of doubt that Zay Flowers is not going to work out? And I told him no, because first of all, he's playing with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And two, he's a very good route runner. So when you have a elite quarterback and you're great at running routes, the chances of you being a bust are highly slim unless you're just one of those guys who are just injury prone or you can't catch the football and you can't get off the line. The second player that I'm going to be watching throughout training camp for Baltimore is Isaiah Likely. And this is somebody who I haven't seen a lot of Ravens fans talking about. And it's really surprising to me considering all the hype that he got last year throughout training camp and the preseason for the Baltimore Ravens. Like, the two players who got the most hype from the Ravens fan base during training camp and preseason last year were Isaiah Likely and also their second-year defensive tackle going into this year, Travis Jones out of UConn. And you haven't really heard too much about those guys so far up to this point. So I want to hear Isaiah Likely making some noise throughout training camp. And some of y'all kind of sleep on Isaiah Likely and what he could potentially do in this Todd Monken offense. He can go two tight ends. Todd Monken ran a lot of two tight end sets during his time being the OC for Georgia. And you already have Mark Andrews on the field, but you have Isaiah Likely, who is more athletic than what Mark Andrews is. Now, he isn't more polished than what Mark Andrews is as the tight end position, because Mark Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the game. I'm not going to disrespect Mark Andrews like that, but you look at a guy like Isaiah Likely, his rookie season was a little bit underrated. 36 receptions, 373 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. I think that's really good production considering the situation that Isaiah Likely was in, being the tight end 2 behind Mark Andrews last season. So imagine what he can do in this Todd Monken offense. You looking for some sleepers on your fantasy football squad to take a risk on when you just have picks to throw away near the end of your drives? You should definitely look into Isaiah Likely. This dude was tearing it up last offseason, tearing it up in the preseason, and he had a pretty good rookie season considering the fact that he was in his first season being the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. That's not an easy transition to make. So look out for Isaiah Likely this year. I want to hear a lot of good stuff about him throughout training camp. And then as I mentioned, Travis Jones, like Isaiah Likely, he was getting a lot of hype and a lot of attention. And last year, he had a pretty decent rookie season, considering the fact that he only played 35% of the Ravens' defensive snaps. I'm expecting him to have a breakout year for Baltimore this year. And they need some productive young pass rushers because Justin Houston, JPP, those guys are gone. Now, you can always bring back Justin Houston because he still currently is a free agent right now, but you need your other young pass rushers to step up. And I think Travis Jones could be one of those guys that ends up breaking out on the interior of that Baltimore Ravens defensive line. This is somebody who is incredibly explosive, really strong. And if you go back and you watch that preseason game that the Ravens played against the Tennessee Titans last year, I mean, this guy was a wrecking crew, a one-man wrecking crew on the Baltimore Ravens defensive line. This dude could not be stopped. And like I said, his rookie season I felt was pretty decent considering that he didn't really play a large amount of the snaps for Baltimore last year. So if he can get 50 to 60% of the Ravens defensive snaps this season, I feel like he's a guy who probably could give you 4 or 5 sacks from that interior defensive line position at D tackle. Now, 2 guys I'm going to be watching next during training camp for Baltimore. These are 2 of some of the Baltimore Ravens' most important players who they need to step up this season: David Ojabo and Odafe Oweh. Now, Odafe Oweh was a first-round pick a couple of years back out of Penn State. And so far throughout his career, I've been a little bit disappointed. Now, I don't know if you're a Ravens fan, what your expectations were for Odafe Oweh, but I didn't think it was going to take this long for him to start making an impact. And last year, he only had 3 sacks. Okay, now, I'm expecting him to be a guy who should at least be able to give you 7, 8 sacks this year. And you're going to need that because where is your production going to come from when it comes to your pass rushers? You need Odafe Oweh to at least be able to show you a little something. So I feel like 7, 8 sacks is fairly realistic and fair expectations for Odafe Oweh. And I need to hear him making a lot of noise throughout training camp, because if not, I'm going to be fairly concerned about the Ravens pass rush going into this year. And David Ojabo, now last year kind of was a red shirt year for David Ojabo, and technically you could probably label him still a rookie because he didn't really get too much in-game action. I think he only appeared in 2 or 3 games maybe last year due to that injury that he suffered before the draft. So David Ojabo is basically going into his first full-time year in the NFL, having no injuries to set him back. And for David Ojabo, if you are somebody who keeps up with the NFL draft, prior to that injury that he suffered, he would have been a top 15 pick, or he was expected to be a top 15 selection. So this is somebody who the Ravens got in the second round of the draft, who was a first-round top 15 caliber talent. So with David Ojabo and Odafe Oweh going into this year, I think the Ravens need both of those 2 guys to flash. And you don't need those guys to give you 10 sacks, but you need those guys to at least give you 7 sacks each at worst. And I think that David Ojabo is capable of that. Odafe Oweh, there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to do it, because he's going into his 3rd season now, and he has to show you something. He has to flash. And the Ravens are an organization that does a pretty good job with drafting defensive linemen. So when you look at the kind of players that the Ravens have had up front over the last couple of years and how good they are at finding pass rushers, like, I expect David Ojabo and Adolphe Owe to have a really good training camp and carry that momentum into the regular season.